So I want to actually follow up on some thoughts that Bill has already touched on. And I'm going to change a little bit about what I want to talk about, because there is a political tumult about antitrust law in a way that just hasn't been present for a while. And I give credit to some of the people that Bill's talked about for bringing these issues to the fore, even if I don't agree with everything that they say. And I think it's an important debate. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what Congress is doing, what the presidential candidates are doing. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on what the agencies are doing, but I do want to mention again the Stigler report and the Thurman report, because it gives you an idea of what's going on in the policy space, as well as a speech that Judge Diane Wood gave at my university a few weeks ago. It just gives you an idea that you know, the times they are changing. Now, I want to add one thing. At least some of the proposals I've heard of would deal with these issues institutionally by essentially making the FTC the sole civil regulator and actually take a whack at the Justice Department on many of the same grounds that you were talking about. So there's a lot of different ways to slice and dice this, and while the FTC has been unfairly kicked around you know, with different critiques over the decades, there's a chance that it's the DOJ that's going to be the piñata in this current set of proposals. So I took a look at the pending legislation, and I was completely underwhelmed. Obviously, anything can change, but of the current 15 or so bills, the vast majority of them deal with pharma issues, some of the issues that we talked about yesterday. It's not that this is important, but it doesn't deal with the issues that Yair you know, teed up about do we have the tools in the digital economy. So there's a ton of interesting proposals that would strengthen the rules against reverse payments, strengthen the rules against patent thickets, patent evergreening, product hopping, a variety of things, and give the FTC either clarify their existing authority or provide new rights to information and new remedies. And you know, I'm not an expert on the Hill, but they have true bipartisan sponsorship and support. And given that there's periodic speeches and comments and tweets from the administration supporting lower drug prices, there's at least some feeling that this is, if anything is going to emerge in this sort of paralyzed Congress, this is something that really might have three vectors of support and emerge successfully. There's, in addition to the pharma bills, which I'm happy to answer any questions about, there's bills that cut both ways about antitrust exemptions. There's two bills that would allow groups that are otherwise competitors to bargain and boycott people that they negotiate with. One is journalists and publications with online media providers and platforms, and the other is actually immunizing health insurance issuers to negotiate jointly with prescription drug companies regarding reimbursement policies. There's also a proposal to eliminate altogether the exemption for insurance. So there's all kinds of conflicting proposals about that. There's some proposals that are evergreen and introduced every year to limit defenses available to OPEC if the administration were to ever bring an antitrust claim against them. And when you get to the more bills that tap into the sort of modern zeitgeist of what's going on here as we rethink what tools we have, the only ones I've found so far are introduced by Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, who is one of the 13,000 candidates running for the Democratic nomination for president. She has introduced some bills that would lower the required impact on competition to block a merger from substantially lessen competition to materially lessen competition. I'm not clear what, if anything, that would achieve. She would also require some companies that enter into consent decrees to provide more information to the FTC for some years afterwards, and establish a new office in the FTC called the Office of Competition Advocate, something along an ombudsman line. And finally, probably one of the worst kept secrets in Washington is that Senator Warren, who Bill alluded to, is drafting some more comprehensive proposal that would actually address substantive rules, procedural rules, rules, institutional structures, and remedies. And there's a chance that if this bill were ever taken up, which I don't think so, but it would certainly make the United States look a little bit more like Europe in terms of provisions that I've heard talking about, which is fascinating and at the same time kind of alarming, because someone just sent me an NPR story very recently that apparently President Trump has recently talked about how we need to ramp up antitrust enforcement and said that we should be more like Europe, which is something I've advocated for years, but now it's making me rethink where I want to be on this issue. Modest legislative proposals on the table so far. One more sweeping proposal that I believe, but have no direct information, will be introduced over the next few weeks. So, what is this gaggle of presidential candidates doing right now? And the answer is surprisingly little. Of the 29 or so, 23, who have announced that they're running for the Democratic nomination, most of them have backgrounds that don't interact with antitrust, and I'm not making a political judgment, but the people who are mayors, who are very recent members of Congress, just haven't had much exposure to these types of issues that we're talking about. So there's not a lot of formal proposals. The main one is Senator Warren, and she would create some notion of a platform utility. Companies with revenues over a certain amount that offer online marketplaces, exchanges, etc., would be designated as platform utilities. They would be subject to FRAND obligations, and also above a certain size, they'd be subject to structural separation between the platform and the seller. And companies below that, who are platforms within the meaning of the defined proposal, would have FRAND-type obligations, but would not have to structurally separate. As a result, there could be fines up to 5% of annual revenue, a much more EU-type remedy than what we currently have in the United States. And under these proposals, Amazon's marketplace, Google's ad exchange, Google search would be platform utilities, and they would be split apart, and Google search would have to be spun off also. And then she also proposes appointing regulators committing to use existing tools to unwind anti-competitive mergers. That would include Amazon, Whole Foods, Zappos, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, Google, Waze, Nest, DoubleClick, and the like. And the other candidates just haven't done much other than a couple of them, Joe Biden included, have just said, we support tough antitrust laws. We don't think you should point the rifle at any one company in terms of legislation. So the next level of response at the policy level are the Stigler report and the Thurman report that Bill has already alluded to. And I just want to highlight some of the language from there and from Judge Wood's remarks, and then I'll stop because I'm not sure how much time I have. In creating these digital units and digital authorities, they're talking about dealing with concepts like bottleneck power, unilateral refusals to deal, exclusive dealing arrangements, other restrictive market agreements. And I think in general, if you care about this stuff, these are critically important issues that have not been front and center in U.S. antitrust, but particularly on the unilateral refusals to deal side, rights of access, dare I say, essential facilities, which is alive and well throughout the world and hanging by a thread in the United States following the Trinco decision. And then I just want to leave you with some of the comments that Judge Wood, Diane Wood of the Seventh Circuit, she's a chief judge. She's a noted antitrust authority and academic. Before she's been on the bench, she's been on the bench about 20 years at this point and written some key decisions along the way. But obviously, the Court of Appeals just takes what comes to it from the federal district courts in the states that the Seventh Circuit covers. And she was talking about the need to deal with these same kinds of issues: access, refusal to deal. I believe she said essential facilities by name, the Seventh Circuit being the source of the MCI decision, which is one of the leading earlier cases in that area in the U.S. And so, the question is, do we have the tools to deal with these issues? And I would say that not as much in the United States as in countries that follow a model, or the EU itself, which really derive that model. And And I think part of the key that the US will find when it looks at its toolkit that is missing is the notion of an abuse of a dominant position. And it's something that is only being indirectly addressed by these proposals so far. But it changes the conversation. It changes the conversation about harmonization and convergence and divergence. And at the moment, the US is the divergent voice in the international community. It will not address abusive notions directly unless you can tie it to an exclusion directly or indirectly. And that's a missing piece of the toolkit. So I think Bill's right to focus on not just on rules and procedures, but on institutions and remedies. And I think that's going to be part of the conversation going forward, whether Elizabeth Warren is president or not. So thanks.